Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys for another show, for another episode of our Let's Talk Arsenal series, our show in which we talk about Arsenal. Thank you so much for tuning in to this exciting and intriguing video. A little bit different to what we're usually about on the channel. If you are new, make sure you do subscribe. We provide Arsenal daily content, including transfer shows, breakdowns, and tactical analysis of Arsenal's transfer targets with the help of experts and journalists across the world that you may know very well about, and podcasts and reaction shows and everything. Have a look at the channel and dive in and see what you've been missing all this time. But this is different because I've not done a video analysing kind of fan opinion before. And it was something that was brought to my attention by Vinny, one of our excellent members. If you'd like to join up and become one of our members and join our Discord server, you can by clicking the link in the description. And Vinny wanted to run a small version of this with the members and try and get their thoughts and feelings around the players that were going to stay, or they wanted to stay rather, and the players they wanted to sell. And I thought, you know what, why not have a look at this from a more general context of the actual fan base. Let's see if we can get a sample size big enough to analyse the Arsenal fan base, and we have managed to do that quite impressively so as well. We're going to run through what we've done, how we've done it, and why we've done it in just a second. But first of all, as I've said already, please make sure you drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you're new around here. Without further ado, let's crack on with the show and look at Arsenal's entire first team squad and the responses which so many people on Twitter got involved with. So there were rules behind this. I wanted to make sure it wasn't just a mindless kind of thing to do. I wanted to try and make it as professional as feasibly possible, which we know half measures on the show. We try and go as far as we can. So there was no context for a reason. It was simply keep or sell. They were the two options that were provided to everyone taking part. I didn't want to go keep but loan them out, or sell, but only if it's for a decent fee. I just wanted to remove kind of the details and remove the difficulties and just leave it as a 50-50 choice between two options that were complete different ends of the spectrum. And to be honest, the response from that was great. There was only, I mean, it must have been in single digits, the amount of people in comparison to how many people actually took the whole thing, that looked at it and went, or quoted the tweet and was like, I would loan this person, or replied to a certain poll and would say, I want to keep this person, or I want to sell them, but only for this amount of money. So people took to that exceptionally well. So that was a really good part of the whole process. The second part was that I included no loan players and no contract expiries. So no Matt Ryan, no Martin Odegaard, no Danny Ceballos. They're not Arsenal players. They will be leaving at the end of the season. And that was not part of the whole process. David Luiz, of course, his contract at the moment is expiring. Had he have signed a new deal at this point, at the date of recording, then of course I would have included him. But at the moment he's going. And so I didn't include him either. This is also just the Arsenal first team. So there's no Balogun, no Aziz. It is all the players that Arsenal list on their first team squad on the official website. It was the only real official way of sticking to those rules. So that's why we went down that route, for those reasons. The next one was to remove as much bias as possible. If you do a poll on Twitter, your followers see that. And obviously people that follow me, I'd say the majority of them would follow me because they're subscribing to my views or my shows and things. And I wanted to try and remove that. So that's why I sent the poll to so many other big Arsenal accounts and small Arsenal accounts and said, can you retweet this? Can you share this? Because I want to try and get as broad of a spectrum as feasibly possible on all of the players, to remove the bias of it being my followers specifically. And thankfully, loads of people responded. It got over 100 retweets. Easy, I think it ended up on something like over 200 likes and something like that. Ridiculous. And some huge accounts. Massive thanks to the likes of Clive and Semperfy on Twitter for retweeting it. Some other big accounts did as well, to really get kind of a really good spread of results from loads of different Arsenal fans. And the final point will take into something that you may also be considering already, that we considered basically 2% of each vote, was going to be an error. So you need to take this with a pinch of salt. There aren't going to be too many Arsenal fans out there that are going to want to see Emile Smith Rowe sold. And yet you're going to see some statistics which show that there is a percentage of the Arsenal fan base that supposedly wants to sell Emile Smith Rowe, for example. So you have to consider that there's going to be a small amount of error. I've estimated it's probably around 2%. It might even be slightly smaller than that. But that's because there could be rival fans that have obviously joined in and voted in silly ways, trolls, obviously, and just error. I mean, French, one of our regular podcasters, texted me in near tears that he'd voted to sell Emile Smith Rowe by accident. So that's always going to happen. You can't take a vote back once you've done it. So you have to kind of bear that in mind as well. So the running order of how this is going to work and how we're going to show you the results is effectively this. For each player, I'm going to briefly intro kind of the player and the thoughts and feelings around that player, show you the results of whether people wanted to keep or sell them based upon the 320,000 people that voted overall, which was about just over 15,000 on average per player. So a really good sample size for the fan base. Then reveal those and then have a little bit of analysis on maybe why it turned out in that way. I'll give you my thoughts and feelings. Some of my thoughts and feelings differ from the actual result, and I think that's really good. And what I will say is, whilst there was a really good response to this entire process, one of the things I did notice that wasn't necessarily as great, and it is important in these kind of experiments to highlight the negatives as well, was that there were some people that were very kind of critical, maybe overcritical, about the results of certain players. Obviously, they don't, like I don't, agree with all of the results. My opinion does not fall in line with the results of every single player on this list. And I think for some people, that was very difficult for them. I think it was very difficult to know that your opinion is not in the majority, that there are more Arsenal fans out there, or more fans or more people that voted that actually feel differently to you. And I think it was, in a way, a social experiment that revealed that there is quite a lot of people that aren't okay with that. And I think that maybe that's something that we need to think about, is that you should be okay with the majority of people not necessarily agreeing with your point. It's your opinion. You're allowed to have it. It's part of football. That's what the game is about. And you shouldn't be criticised for having that opinion either. So that was definitely something that was interesting. The statistics of the whole team. So once we've gone through every player, I've actually done some analysis on what this means for the whole side, how it stacks up and how much of the team people want to get rid of, some specific kind of age brackets as well, and some homegrown stuff too. So stick around to the end of the video to find that out. And also I've done an interesting thing with the starting 11 towards the end of the video as well, so make sure you stick around for that, and then we're going to conclude at the end as well. So let's kick things off. As I've said already, if you've joined us a little bit late in the live show, make sure you're dropping that like on the video. There's a lot of effort and work that's gone into this, so I really hope you appreciate the effort that has gone into this indeed. So we kick off with Bernd Leno, who of course, German goalkeeper, started most of our games this season in goal. And very recently, some quotes have come out, some reports have come out regarding him. It may have been interesting to see if the results were any different, say a year ago, but a few months ago, before those reports, before his interview about being open to a new adventure. And for those players that are still here, this might become a thing that we do every year at the end of seasons, and we'll see how fan opinion has changed on players. That's certainly something that will be interesting. Maybe every 6 months we do another poll and another kind of consensus or a census of results. But Leno, interestingly, it was still quite close, but 57.5% of people said they would rather see Bernd Leno go. Now, this was one of the players that I saw a lot of kind of backlash to from certain fans, saying, how can we be voting him out? He's someone that's done some really good stuff for us. People are turning on him very quickly. In my view, the reason why this result came out as it was more to do with the fact that there's been some poor form of late, and also his comments in the media, and the fact that Emi Martinez, who we obviously let go, has been a much better keeper this season than Leno. I think all of those factors will have influenced people's views and opinions. I personally agree with this. I think that we would and should move him on this summer and look to bring in a keeper that wants to be here for the long term, that isn't open to a new adventure, as he put it, and someone that we can get more out of, maybe for the long term too. Maybe Emi Martinez. So there's Leno. Moving on to Runarsson. There won't be any guesses or prizes, rather, for seeing what the results of this one were. But Runarsson, the Icelandic goalkeeper, of course, came in from Dijon in France in the summer, and his performances has been fairly poor. Arsenal claim that he came in as our third choice keeper, even though he was our backup in the Europa League and in the League Cup for quite a while. And unsurprisingly, 88.6% of people still want to see him sold. I imagine that there's over 10% of people saying keep, just because what's the point of letting him go? He's going to be a third choice keeper for us. It's not really that big of a deal. We're not going to be able to get any money for him. Maybe we should just keep him. That's the only reason why I can come up with why more than 10% have said keep. I would personally move him on and allow one of the youngsters, one of the homegrown talents, to take that third place spot in the team. Bellerin. Very interesting one for a lot of reasons, of course. Has struggled this season, has been supposedly open to a move. Reports came out yesterday, which of course impacted the poll greatly, that he's willing in open, and he's been put on Arsenal's kind of transfer list as being available for a purchase. So unsurprisingly, 91.1% of over 15,000 fans that voted want to see Bellerin sold this summer. Doesn't surprise me. I'm in the same camp as them. And I think it's a position that Arsenal should be looking at upgrading on. And don't you worry, we'll be back reviewing every single Arsenal transfer target in the area. I've got some interesting stuff coming up regarding Emerson in the coming weeks, which is another player we've been linked to. So not surprising in any way, I think you'll agree. Cedric. Cedric's a fun one because, I mean, if you saw on Twitter the other day, me and Arsblog had a small back and forth on Twitter about Cedric. I feel that he's been a little bit hard done by in recent games, especially considering that Granit Xhaka has been playing at left back and it's really cost us in the middle of the park. I also think him getting called up to the latest Portuguese national side has probably been absolutely scuppered now by the fact he's not played at all. He made that mistake against Slavia Prague when he came on as a sub, which cost us a corner, which led to their equaliser. And since then, he's not got a look in. And I really do think that's a bit harsh from Arteta, to be honest. And apparently the fan base are siding in more the direction to keep Cedric, because 66.1% of fans would rather see Cedric's kept to the club. Now, I do think this is certainly with the mindset of keeping him as kind of the backup option, as someone that is going to be able to play both right and left back if we need him to, can be a decent sub if he wants to come on. And if our right back that we hopefully will sign in the summer gets injured, Cedric's a good player to obviously take forwards and to use at the same time. Chambers. Callum Chambers, obviously injured for most of this season, came back towards the latter stages and has come in and done really, really well. And for that reason, I'm not surprised that 75% of people want to see Callum Chambers at the club next season, want to see him starting, or not necessarily starting, but being used here and there. He's got 1 year left on his deal, which does complicate matters. And I think if for that many people that wanted him to keep him, would probably be open to a 1 or 2 year extension on his deal. He can play centre-back. He can play right-back. He is a utility player. He does provide us with those options. If we aren't in Europe, though, I do kind of question, do we need to keep hold of Chambers? Can we maybe sell him and get some money for him? It's an interesting player. And it did surprise me how many people really did vote in favour of keeping him. Not that I'm very much against that. I just found it very surprising. I probably do lean more towards the keep side of things for utility reasons. But to see that many people open to keeping Chambers, and to see maybe if I'd have done this poll, say 3-4 months ago, how that would have differed, it's a very interesting one. And that's why I'm planning on doing this kind of maybe every 6 months, every year, and seeing how the results go. Rob Holding. This split the fan base massively. 53% of people said they would rather keep Rob Holding, and 46.9% said that they would sell Rob Holding. He has just signed a new deal, which makes selling him a strange move from the club's perspective, not from necessarily a fan point perspective. For me, I'm okay with Rob Holding being an Arsenal player. I'm not okay with Rob Holding being Arsenal's starting right back going into next season. I think that Rob Holding is a player that is still underrated by much of the fan base. I think he is defensively better than what a lot of people give him credit for, but he's not of the level, in my view, that's going to take that right-sided centre-back slot into the future. Saliba might be that guy, and we'll come on to him in just a bit, very shortly. But I think that Holding to be a backup and to be kind of not a tutor to Saliba, but certainly someone that can step in when necessary for the Frenchman next season at different points. He might even, his presence may stop us from signing someone as well. So that's an interesting split. And I saw a lot of people criticising the majority going for a keep, even though it was a very slender majority, of course. Saliba, as we've just mentioned there, you'll be unsurprised to know that 95.7% of people have said keep. Now, of all of our players that are very much on the keep side of things, this is towards the lower 90s. We'll see some in a bit that are more 97, 98s in terms of keeps. And that 4.3% sell maybe comes from, of course, the error that we talked about earlier on, but also the interviews that he's done and that side of things, and some people have found it difficult to go over. And of course, the controversy that we know he was involved in as well may have turned a couple of people's minds. But of 15,000, that's still a couple of hundred people that are thinking, I'm not so sure on Saliba. So interesting to look at those statistics, of course. But obviously, Saliba should be kept at the club. He's been an investment. He's done really well since going on loan to Nice, has become a bit of a leader, even though he's still only 19 years of age, and worked well with Jean-Claude Todibo, who's been on loan from Barcelona as well. So we plan on doing, by the way, a tactical breakdown on Saliba specifically and giving you some insight on his season as a whole. So I look forward to giving you that. But yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what he's about next season and what he can give Arsenal in terms of moving forwards. Mavropanos. Now, of course, between Saliba and Mavropanos, they're the two players that you look at and go, well, if we're going to keep one, the other one's probably going to have to go. So it's unsurprising that with Saliba being kept by the majority, that more people have said sell, although it is still very close. 53.7% just win it out in sell for Mavropanos. I think people have seen how good he's been at Stuttgart and feel like he should maybe be given a chance just to see how he would do at Arsenal. But when you think about the fact that Holding's here, Chambers, if you saw how many people would keep Chambers, more people would rather see Chambers kept over Mavropanos, which is very interesting, of course, for different reasons. Of course, we might be able to get a fair amount of money for the Greek defender. So that's something to consider. But it did shock me how close these two statistics did fall for the 23-year-old. I think that he's going to go in the summer. I think Arsenal are going to try and look to get as much money from him as possible. We may even see him go on loan. Once again, he did sign a new deal not so long ago, so that is kind of protected if we wanted to do that. But I would still want to see maybe a year extension before going on loan, just to protect that value further in case he really smashes it next season. Sven Mislintat, Stuttgart's head of recruitment, our former head scout, was very much a fan of this guy, and you can see why he has gone to Stuttgart and done so well after doing well at Nuremberg as well the previous season. Gabriel, I don't think I need to do much of an intro on this guy. 96.1% have said keep on Gabriel. I don't think we've seen the best of Gabriel this season. I think there's more to come from the guy. I think he needs a better partner. Is that Saliba? We'll have to wait and see. He's clearly played better with David Luiz next to him. Is it going to work better with Saliba, a much more inexperienced player, but someone who I think is a lot more mobile than, say, Rob Holding, who he hasn't necessarily worked so well with? He's made some rash decisions. He's got sent off in the game against Southampton. He's made some iffy kind of choices in that area. But I think that he is going to be the defender that we've been calling out for. Maybe not as impactful as, say, a Van Dijk at Liverpool, but I think he can be a really good signing for Arsenal and someone that will go forward to develop into a starting centre-back for the years to come. I don't see this as another Mustafi. I don't see it as another Socrates. I look at this as a very astute piece of business. I'm hoping that he's going to become the player that we all know that he's got the quality and capabilities to become. Pablo Mari, another player that's obviously come in recent times, signed him permanently this summer and has been a very astute backup to Gabriel. And it's no surprise that a large majority of the fan base would still keep him. It actually surprised me that there was as high as 17.7% of people that would sell him. I think he's been absolutely fine. And I think he's a really good backup to Gabriel going forwards. He's 27 years of age. He's really experienced. He's played in different countries. He can communicate really well with a number of players, speaking in different languages also. I think he's worthy of kind of developing into a bit of a leader within the dressing room as well. He's very vocal. And I think he's someone that I would trust to be cover for Gabriel moving forward. So that in itself is very self-explanatory also. Kieran Tierney. Simple as that. 97.1% of people have said keep. I don't know who the 2.9% are. But Kieran Tierney obviously is Arsenal's arguably, maybe, even their best player. He's been that good for us, that he is that influential in that. Apparently, according to reports coming out this morning, that he is in line for a new contract. If Arsenal can get this guy signed up to a new deal, that's massive for us, because there has been rumours and suggestions that he should move away from Arsenal. And if we're serious about rebuilding, becoming the team that we need to become, our left back is sorted. Tierney is the man for the future. It's only his fitness that is a bit of a concern, but if he can get over those issues, he can be up there with the best, if not the best left backs in the Premier League in the near future. Kolasinac, speaking, I mean, you talk about going from one end of the spectrum to the other in terms of left backs, and unsurprisingly, so does our statistics, also 96.3% of Arsenal fans would see him sold. To try and reason with that very small 3.7%, maybe they see the fact that he's got 1 year left on his deal and the fact that we've needed cover at left back and that's cost us, would maybe think that we need to invest elsewhere on the pitch. And you could keep Kolasinac maybe just for a season. But to be honest, I think you're better off going for someone else, even if it is just for cover in that position because of Kolasinac's high wages. Get him off the wage bill, get him out of the club, move him on. I agree with the majority wholeheartedly. He's not done what he's needed to do. He hasn't translated his fantastic final season at Schalke before he arrived at Arsenal over here. And so it makes complete sense that he is going to be going, and fingers crossed will be going in the summer. And I agree with those votes there. Moving into the midfield-ish with Ainsley Maitland-Niles, our TGT mascot Mainsley. This was an interesting one. I would have personally, I mean, I'll tell you what my personal thoughts are in a second. I'll show you the stats. But 65.7% of people would want to see him sold now. I think that we missed a bit of a trick with Maitland-Niles and the offers that came in last summer. We probably should have moved him on last summer when his value was around the £20 million mark. I don't think it's going to be that high this summer. I don't know what kind of position is best for him. I don't think he knows what position is best for him. But as an England international, we got him into that position and we turned down a 20 million bid that I just don't think you're going to be getting this summer. Who knows? Maybe I'm wrong. Fingers crossed I'm wrong, because I'd love to see us get that amount of money for him, but I just can't see it. Guendouzi. Oh, my pal Guendouzi. If you are long-time listeners of the show, me and Guendouzi have gone back and forth on a few times. And I mean, the results fall in my kind of opinion about moving him on. I am not surprised that there is still a sizable percentage of people that want to see Guendouzi kept at the club. People like his attitude, people like his winning mentality, people like his energy on the pitch. I fall in the majority. I think that he's a bit of a lost cause, to be honest, at Arsenal. I think that the ship has sailed on Guendouzi's future at the club. I don't think that he suits what we are trying to build and the culture that we're trying to change necessarily. I also don't think that he gets in ahead of our two current starting centre midfielders, which I know a lot of people may disagree with, in Granit Xhaka or Thomas Partey. I also think that we should be signing someone like a Basuma in the summer, and I don't see Guendouzi getting in ahead of him. I'd rather personally keep, if he was up for staying, and we'll come on to him in a second, Lucas Torreira over someone like Guendouzi. But yeah, it's not worked out. It's a real shame that it went down the route it did. He had the potential and still has the potential, I think, to be a good player. I just don't think it's going to happen at Arsenal. Speaking of Lucas Torreira, fantastic picture. Did enjoy finding this one. And it's unsurprising to see, again, that a lot of people would see him sold now. His value has absolutely tanked since going on loan to Atletico Madrid, not only because he hasn't played, but because of his comments about wanting to leave the club for Boca Juniors. He has had a very rough time this year, of course, losing his mother. But in the most sensitive way possible, it is something that I think Arteta in the press conference dealt with quite well. And we've not been complimenting Arteta too much of late, but the fact that it's a very sensitive time for him, it was always going to be that there might be some comments that get taken that are very emotional, but he's stuck by those comments, and it seems like he still wants to go even after a time of reflection. And if that's the case, let him go. I think with the fact that Edinson Cavani is staying at Manchester United and Boca Juniors wanted him, does open up the opportunity for their large wage kind of packet to go on a player like Torreira who wants that move. And they are still interested, but no proposals have been made by Boca Juniors at the moment. But 89% saying that they would sell Torreira. Mohamed El Neni, the greatest Egyptian Premier League footballer by a distance. Sorry, Liverpool fans. But El Neni is obviously, he's a likeable character. That is for sure. He might be a likeable character, but for me, he's not Arsenal starting quality. Some people might say, and I think there's a percentage of people here that will say that he's a decent player for your squad. 35.8% of them will, but 64.2%. I agree with them. I think we should look to move El Neni on. I think he's taking up a position in the squad that could be filled by a youngster, by giving them a few minutes, by the minutes like Miguel Aziz that's coming in. Why not give him the minutes that you're giving to El Neni to help him develop? It's not going to be too many minutes at the start, but they will grow. And I think El Neni blocks that route. Giving him a new contract, I'm just not so sure. On the plus side, if we do keep him, he's a player that's happy to be a utility guy. But I would move him on, and I agree with the majority on this one. Xhaka. I'm just going to take a sip of water before I talk about Granit Xhaka. In regards to the Swiss midfielder, people know my views on the guy. I think he's incredibly underrated by a lot of the fan base. I think that's shown by his absence in midfield, and when we don't have him in the right position, I think he's been absolutely not awful at left back, but he hasn't been the player that we've needed him to be, and he never should have been moved out of that midfield role. And we lost the balance with Partey. It meant that we had to play Ceballos. And I am pleased that the results showed that a 68.4% of people would rather keep him at the club. It did surprise me it was that many. I thought it was going to be a lot closer to 50-50, but only 31.6% would sell him on. There is a discussion to be had around Xhaka. A lot of people obviously did tweet when they were seeing the results of this who weren't happy with this result, and I can have empathy for that. But what I would say is that there was a few comments talking about how they felt that Xhaka's presence has been emblematic of Arsenal's decline. I disagree with that wholeheartedly. I think of the players in our team, Granit Xhaka is one of those that can be in the squad to help us get back to where we need. And it's actually other positions on the pitch and extra strengthening in the centre midfield area that's going to get us there. I just think that when Granit Xhaka's not there, we drop off so much that it costs us. If we have a Basuma, if we have a Guido Rodriguez, if we have one of these guys in the middle and able to support Partey or play with Partey and play with Xhaka, and you can play different types. But the drop-off between Xhaka and Partey, or rather the drop-off from Partey to Xhaka to the rest, is just so big that when he's not there, it's a real big issue for us. Some people have said that his importance is a criticism of Arsenal in itself. I think that's harsh. I think he's a player that should be kept at the club, a player that we should strengthen with still in the midfield. And if you're looking for an upgrade on Granit Xhaka, the biggest compliment to the player is it's going to cost you a hell of a lot to find it. And I think that's why a lot of people would rather see him stay at the club. Leadership-wise as well, those qualities all come into it too. Thomas Partey, 95.1% people would keep him. I don't think we've seen the best of him this season. I still think that he is a player that can offer Arsenal a hell of a lot more than what we've seen, and injuries have definitely played a huge part in that. But more importantly, he's a player that I think we need to consider as someone that is going to be taking Arsenal to the next level. He showed Atletico Madrid that he can be and is a world-class midfielder. I thought he was one of the best, arguably in the top three midfielders in the whole of La Liga last season and the season prior. He has been that good. And when he signed for Arsenal, the fact that he was injured so much really did hurt us. Massively, massively hurt us. So that was a real concern for me, that he couldn't really get a few games together. He has done in this second half of the season, but it has coincided with a bit of a drop in Arsenal's form that we didn't see after Boxing Day. I want to see us add to the midfield and strengthen with Granit Xhaka and Partey, and I feel like he can be a transformative figure for us still next season. Maybe after a full pre-season, we're going to see the best from this guy when he's a little bit more mature, when he's still developed more. He's turning 28 if he hasn't already, 28, 29 soon. And I think that he's still going to be an absolute star for us going into next season. A starte, you might say. Emile Smith Rowe, French. I can't believe he voted sell on this one. I'm only kidding, French. Of course, I know he did press the wrong button. The absolute fraudulent behaviour. And unsurprisingly, he is part of that 3% that want to see Emile Smith Rowe sold. Absolutely crazy. Smith Rowe has been a revelation for us this season. He really did transform Arsenal's fortunes when he came into the side against Chelsea, added that creativity. He needs to add goals. There are criticisms I've got of his game. He needs to have a better final product. He needs to score more goals. And his final ball needs to be a little bit more determined. It can be a little bit of a hospital pass at times, but he is an excellent prospect. He is someone that I really look forward to watching him progress through the team. And Art de Roche from The Athletic won't thank me for using the words Croydon De Bruyne, but I am excited to see what Smith Rowe does at Arsenal in the future. He is an exciting player. Joe Willock. This is another intriguing one on our list. And if I'd have done this poll 6 months ago in comparison to doing it now, I feel like these results would have been very, very different. I used to put Willock into a category of players along with Nelson and Nketiah, who we'll come on to a little bit later, who I never thought, and still to a degree think, that will not achieve a level that's required at Arsenal. This loan spell at Newcastle has been excellent from the England Youth International. He's done really well. He's starting games now for Steve Bruce's side, and he's helped them to stay in the Premier League. He's been brilliant. I think it would be very harsh to not reward a good loan spell. I also am conflicted because I think that the money offered for Willock, I worry that if we keep him, similar to Ainsley Maitland-Niles, if he doesn't have a good season, then we may have seen the best of him on a loan spell at Newcastle, if that is in fact what some people may call his level. I think, and I'm growing gradually more, if his consistent play goes for the next few games for Newcastle, that maybe he should be given a chance. My opinion is changing on Willock a lot. You should be open to having your opinion changed on players, and you should not set your stall out for one kind of way and never be open to changing. I am open to having my mind change on Joe Willock, and he is providing goals from midfield, which is something that Arsenal have massively lacked. And that's why I'm not surprised to see that 63.4% of people are now leaning towards keeping him. And I think that 36.6% of people that are saying sell, I think the majority of them are saying that because they think we can get a good fee for this guy in the summer, which is something we haven't been able to do for a lot of our players. But I am more open than I was a fair few weeks ago about the prospect of Joe Willock maybe staying at Arsenal Football Club. And I'm excited to see his last few games for Newcastle and his pre-season at the club, should he not leave the club in the summer window. Bukayo Saka, no intro needed. 97.1% of people would rather see him kept at Arsenal for very obvious reasons. He's a special kid. He's burnt out. That's the biggest problem with him this season. I think he is a bit burnt out. And it was absolutely gutting. It really felt like a bit of a stab in the back from Arteta to play him at left back against West Brom and see it work so well when we could have been doing that for the majority of the time that Granit Xhaka has been playing there. It really did hurt to see that. And really did fill me with a lot of kind of regret that it wasn't being used early. It wasn't my decision, but still there was that feeling of regret there. He's the great talent. I hope that he goes to the Euros. I hope that Mason Greenwood doesn't have this form and pip him out of the squad. I think that would be harsh considering the season that Saka's had. He deserves the call-up and he should be going to the European Championships. I think he's more versatile than Greenwood and can provide us more than he can, especially creatively. And he's versatile that he can play left back if needed. Not that England need any more fullbacks in their squad, that is for sure. But I'm looking forward to seeing him develop again next season at Arsenal. Reiss Nelson, similar to Willock, very interesting. Less so because, of course, he's barely played for us. And I am surprised that this percentage is not higher in the sell marker. It really did shock me that 42.5% would still like to see him kept. I think that comes down to what we've seen in the past with him being so highly rated. I lean towards sell quite heavily, to be honest. If I'm on a spectrum of 0 to 100% on sell, I'm in the 90s, to be honest, in terms of where I would move with Nelson. I think of the chances he's been given, he's not taken them. Some might say, and quite rightly, he's not been given enough chances. But the few that he has been, he hasn't impressed me. And I think that when you look at the players that are in the wide areas for Arsenal, he isn't going to get a look in. I do think there is credence and fair play for Arseblog to bringing this up, or if it was James in the podcast, can't remember, that they said if you would have given the same minutes to Nelson as you've given to Willian this season, would he have given more than Willian? And the honest answer from someone that wants to see him be sold is still probably yes. You probably would have seen more from Nelson. Maybe it's a shame, but that's not the reality that we've got. He didn't play. He's not taken a few chances that he did get, in my view. So I think I lean more towards sell, but I can understand the side of the argument that says keep him because he had all that potential and he signed a new deal, but maybe he could fetch us a decent fee and maybe we should push forward with some other options. Martinelli, again, not really much introduction needed besides the fact that I think that the experimentation of a striker probably needs to stop, in my view. And I think we need to develop him as a wide player. Another reason why Reiss Nelson probably doesn't get into Arsenal's squad. And it's unsurprising to see that 96.6% of people would like to see him kept at the club. I said this a while ago, more than a year ago now. I do see him being one of the players that Arsenal end up selling over someone like Bukayo Saka, because I just think that once he develops, he will be one of those players that will see Arsenal as a bit of a stepping stone. I don't know why I get that feeling. I just get that. I get a bit of a feeling about that from him. But he's an amazing talent. I really hope he develops. I hope he gets more time next season to play. And I hope that he can come into the Arsenal squad and really make a difference for Arsenal and start taking the chances that he does get. Because I think the chances that he's been given in this second half of the season, he's not taken the majority of them yet. And that probably comes down to a lack of consistency and obviously the injury as well. But he should be being given more minutes. It's as simple as that, really. Nicola Pepe, of course, scored a great goal against West Brom and has had a pretty similar season to last season. It's not £72 million worth of Nicola Pepe. It's probably not even £40 million worth Nicola Pepe. But there are flashes of brilliance. There are flashes of that price tag. we just need to see it happen on a more consistent basis. I think that Arteta takes some of the blame for this because I think he's not been using him consistently enough, and I think he gave Willian way too many chances over Pepe this season. But it is unsurprising to see that 83.4% of people would still keep Pepe and 16.6% of people would move him on. I think that's probably a fair representation of how I am with the player. I'm probably that far along the spectrum of saying keep, so that makes a lot of sense. Willian, 92.3. It does surprise me that this isn't higher, actually. Maybe it's more because of the length of contract we've given him. It's going to be difficult to move him on. But still, I am surprised that a massive 7.7% of people said keep. That does shock me, genuinely. But 92.3 is obviously still very damning on the player's performances this season, how poor he's been. There's been rumours of maybe MLS interest. There's rumours that he may be open to leaving, according to The Athletic as well. If there's a chance to let him go, let him go. Just move him on. You're taking up time for Pepe. He's taking up time for Martinelli. Move him on. It's not worked. I understand why you went for him in the first place, but it's just not been a successful story. Eddie Nketiah, his time for me at Arsenal is very much done, as the fan base seemingly agrees. 90.6% of those thousands of votes that came in said that they would rather see Eddie Nketiah moved on, with 9.4% saying that they would keep him. It's just how it is. Balogun signed a new deal. Get him into the team. Stop putting time into Nketiah. His time and his chances have been and gone, and it's time that we gave those minutes to someone else. Lacazette. Now, the last two players on our list, Lacazette and Aubameyang, have very similar kind of stats in terms of the keep and sell. They are just completely flipped. And it does go to show that more people would rather keep Aubameyang than they would rather keep Lacazette. And maybe that comes down to Aubameyang's record at Arsenal, his goal-scoring record. But there's no doubt in my mind that Lacazette has been the better player out of the pair this season. And maybe even in a couple of the seasons that he's been here. I mean, we won the Player of the Season in 18-19. And he was excellent that year. But he doesn't score enough goals. That's the fact of the matter. And he has 1 year left on his deal. He's 30 in May, so he's 30 this year, this month, and he's got 1 year left. So that I can see why people want to see him gone. I'm more in the camp of saying, if we're going to invest in strikers this summer, I don't know how much better you can get than a 30-year-old Lacazette right now. So I'm more in the camp of giving him a 1 year extension, just a 1 year extension, and investing the money in right backs, centre mid, maybe right-sided centre back, back up left back, back up goalkeeper, and a forward, be it in a wide area maybe, and an attacking midfielder, rather than spending money on a striker. I just think there's more. I think Arsenal can get more out of both of the two. And speaking of Aubameyang, it was completely flipped. 65.8% of people would rather see him kept. It seems to be that if you voted keep on Aubameyang, you voted sell on Lacazette and vice versa. It is odd how similar those two statistics are in kind of the flipped reverse. So I think that's pretty much the thinking. Aubameyang's not had the best of seasons. He knows that. He's put it down to fans being in the ground, which I think is an unacceptable explanation. A player should not need fan support and to build off their ego for that. I understand that some players thrive off the arrogance of being in grounds. Thierry Henry was a great player for that. But I think Aubameyang is a player that we have come to expect more from and should expect more from. And it's not an excuse to not have fans in the ground as to why he's performed so poorly and why his body language has been as it is and why he has had the disciplinary problems that he's also faced. Not turning up to a North London derby on time, for instance, is a bit of a shame. But I'm open to seeing what happens next season. We've got him. He's on a big deal. And I think that is ultimately probably the most, not imprisoning point about it, but certainly the bit that keeps Arsenal very much down the route of investing in Aubameyang into next season. So Arsenal overall, that concludes the squad side of things. The fan base has spoken, and they think that 54% of Arsenal's squad should be kept and 46% of the first team squad at this point in time should be sold. And I tell you, that is bad, because a side of Arsenal's calibre should not have nearly half the squad being wanted to be sold. And I tell you, there was plenty of people whose votes were very much more above 50% of the players that they would be selling as well. And people tweeted and DM'd me saying that they feel like they've gotten rid of pretty much 3/4 of Arsenal's squad with who they picked. And I'm not surprised. It's not been a good enough season. It's not been okay as what's happened, and the squad needs a massive overhaul. But there are still some surprising statistics that you may want to learn about, so stick with us. Over 24s in the squad, 53% of them would be kept. Again, there's a huge amount of those that would be sold because our senior players this season have let us down. It's just a fact. It's a matter of fact that they've let us down this season. Our experience, our senior players, and we are in the position that we are, and why our youngsters have really dragged us through. But still, only 54% of the under 25s are being kept by the fan base. There are quite a few that are under that people are thinking and we should move on. And Nketiah, Nelson, Mavropanos, all of these under 25s, people think that we should probably still move on, which makes a lot of sense. But there is a lot of hope in our under 25s, in Emile Smith Rowe, in Saka, in Martinelli, in Saliba, in Kieran Tierney, in Gabriel. Like all of these guys, there is a lot of hope in them. But there's still quite a few youngsters that we need to be moving on in the summer window. In our homegrown quota, 60% of our homegrown players are being kept, unsurprisingly, and that 40% is pretty much made up by the likes of Nelson and Nketiah, etc. So it's unsurprising to see them on the list of players that are being looked to be sold. But in that keep, you still find players like Callum Chambers, like Rob Holding. So that's also interesting. Now, for the final part of the video, before we go on to the conclusion, of course, I thought there was something quite interesting. So what I did was I've put together an Arsenal 11 of the players that have played more in the Premier League and have got more Premier League appearances than anyone else in the squad right now. And it goes as follows. Bernd Leno, Hector Bellerin, Rob Holding, Gabriel, Tierney, Granit Xhaka, Partey, Emile Smith Rowe, Saka, Pepe and Lacazette in their respective positions. And of course, not including the likes of Dani Ceballos, Martin Odegaard and David Luiz and players like that who are on loan or have their contracts expiring. All of these players in these relevant positions have played more than their counterparts. I should say that El Neni and Partey have got the same amount of Premier League appearances at 21. I believe that's right. But Partey, of course, we would put in over him. Now, it is interesting that of that 11, just 3, the majority of the fan base said on those players they would rather see sold. And that's interesting because it tells us that the majority of the actual starting 11, people are happy with these players, on the majority anyway. There are some players where it is a lot closer, like Granit Xhaka and like Rob Holding, for instance. But, I mean, if you look at the votes for Gabriel and for Tierney and for Partey and for Smith Rowe and for Pepe and for Saka, they are all very much in the keep section. Now, what I would say is that players like Rob Holding and Granit Xhaka needs to be upgraded upon. And that's 2 key positions that I feel probably still do need upgrading or certainly strengthening. Right back, goalkeeper and striker are another couple of, or rather 3 positions that do need more attention paid to them. But it is interesting for a side that finished as low as it did and for one of their worst Premier League seasons, that our starting 11 of the players that played more Premier League appearances than any other, that 8 of those starting 11 are preferred by our fan base to be kept. So that was certainly something to think about. So in conclusion of today's video and the squad analysis that we've gone through, it is very, very important to think about the fact of the matter that this squad is in desperate need of attention. We know that seemingly that, well, we hope rather than know that seemingly will be coming this summer. Arteta has spoken positively from the point of view of a fan that wants to see the squad given a massive makeover this summer. Whether or not that happens is another question. But I do think that we can have a little bit of hope about the summer and what we're going to do, even without the prospect of European football. Maybe I'm naive, I probably am, and I'm an optimistic guy. But there is a lot of work that needs to be done. There's a lot of players that need to be moved on. We've shown in the last couple of windows in January the players that we can get in that are quite smart, on loan even, Odegaard and Matt Ryan. And in the summer, players that we can get in permanently like Gabriel and Partey. And even in the previous summer window, like Martinelli and like Kieran Tierney. And arguably, it may rub people up the wrong way, but even I think David Luiz has justified that £8 million figure that we paid for him. There is a change in the way that Arsenal are recruiting more positively, and there is also a change on the other side of things of being ruthless with our squad and moving on players that we need to move on. The bit that has not yet changed is how we sell players and how we make money for players. That needs to be much, much better. And we desperately, desperately need to improve that if we are going to be a club that is able to transform this side. That is very, very obvious. I really hope you've enjoyed this insight into kind of Arsenal's squad. We had, as I said, over 320,000 individual votes across the whole squad, which was averaging just about 16,000 votes per player, which is an amazing kind of feedback from everyone that's tuned in. And so I really appreciate all of the support that we got from this. If you have tuned in for the Gooner Talk for the first time, first of all, where the hell have you been? Welcome, and I hope you've enjoyed this first taste of TGT content. We do an 8 a.m. transfer show every single day. We do tactical breakdowns looking at Arsenal players that we've been linked to. We get experts and journalists on to give you expert insight. And it's a channel that maybe not necessarily falls in line with the norm of Arsenal channels. It's not shouty and sweary. It's more kind of grounded, level-headed, a little bit of chatting, experts coming on, giving you insight from perspective, leagues and countries and nations. So if you have enjoyed the show, please drop a like on it. Please subscribe to the channel. And I'll be back with you guys very, very soon for another show. Chat box, thank you ever so much for everyone that's been tuning in. It's not been a show where I've been able to integrate and, or rather, interact with you guys so much. But if you are new to the show, the chat box will tell you that we take our chat box very seriously and we get them involved in pretty much every single show, as well as our members as well. So I really hope you've enjoyed this, and I will see you a little bit later on for the next one. It might be a reaction for the Chelsea game. There will certainly be an 8 a.m. transfer show in the morning as well. It's been a pleasure to speak to you guys as always, and as always, up the Arsenal.